I'm Adrienne Alpert. Congressman Royce, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Adrienne.
The pressure is on Congress to reach agreement on the national debt. This week, the House GOP leader, Eric Cantor, said he's cautiously optimistic that you'll have cuts at least as large as the government's ability to borrow. Do you agree that's achievable?
I think it is achievable. It's very wise for us to do that. And I think that's the kind of agreement that would bring to the markets some sense that there's certainty that we're actually going to tackle the deficit and not increase it. And so that would be of paramount importance.
This calls for raising the debt ceiling before the August 2nd deadline. That would keep government afloat for a year and a half as this vote goes. That would be a decade, then still required to pay off $2.4 trillion in debt. All this talk almost boggles the mind about how this is paid off whenever these decisions are made.
Yeah, I'm a deficit hawk, so I remember in '94 when we reached the agreement between the White House and Congress, with President Clinton and a Republican Congress, to reach an accord in order to wind down the deficit. And over the ensuing years, we were able to do that. The consequences of that were very beneficial for the economy, and we can look back to that time when Japan decided to do exactly the opposite. They were going to get out of their doldrums by increasing their spending and increasing their deficit. They've had no economic growth ever since. So we need to get back to an idea of a glide path back to a balanced budget. And that's an agreement that I'm hopeful the President can reach with the Republicans. I think we're ready on the Republican side to do exactly that.
Well, you have said that over 150 economists have joined Speaker Boehner saying job growth requires spending cuts. That, I think, is tied into all that we're talking about here. What more can you cut?
Oh, I think if you look at the increases that we've had in every agency budget, especially when Speaker Pelosi came in and we saw more than double-digit increases. I mean, massive increases in every government agency, every government department. I would wind down the size of these agencies. I actually wind down a lot of the welfare programs and begin to do what we did in that agreement we had in '94. Reach an agreement that the goal is a balanced budget. Reach an agreement that we're going to do that in a number of years, and then make the hard choices. The reason is because that will send people back to work. Why? Because a lot of the uncertainty out there is killing job creation. That's why the economists are worried about this. And they say the only way to get out of this is a credible plan to get us back to a balanced budget. Everything has to be on the table in that regard.
There was the president this week expressing concern about the slowdown in the economy. Already there's talk of maybe a double dip, but he's not worried about the second recession. He says that we shouldn't panic, that it's still a slow but steady path to recovery despite the high unemployment and the still high gas prices. Do you agree?
Well, unemployment is over 8%, and it has been so for, what, 26 months now? About 27 months? So this has been a sustained period of a tremendous amount of uncertainty out there in the economy. And again, I get back to the fact that you look at people shorting U.S. Treasuries right now, it's very clear that the market is anticipating, as a result of these deficits and as a result of the increase in government spending that we've seen, the market is anticipating future inflation. And as a result, in that kind of an environment, you're not seeing the kinds of investments that you need for job creation. So this has to be addressed. The deficit has to be addressed. And I would say at the point in time when the President is meeting with congressional leaders, now is the time for all of us, to come to the table and make those hard choices as was done in '94. And let's get back to a balanced budget.
Economists some time ago were predicting, though, that there might be a recovery, but that would be called a jobless recovery. Do you agree with that?
Well, we have the worst of both worlds here. We have neither the recovery nor the jobs. And so I think that shows why, unfortunately, we're trending towards the Japanese model. And we can't keep expanding the public sector while shrinking the private sector and adding new government entitlements and new government spending programs while shrinking the amount of capital available to where real jobs are created in the private sector.
Let's
That's
talk about
the Japanese lesson.
A couple of entitlements, sure. those third rails of discussion, Medicare, Social Security. Now, Social Security projected now to be secure for at least another 25 years.
And there are ways, certainly, to make sure that Social Security is is viable long range. I think we know how to come to the table on Social Security. That's been done before.
How about Medicare?
And Medicare is a harder challenge here, because clearly the actuarial reports show that Medicare is headed towards a real problem. And so, what we want to do is make certain that we protect seniors today and those who are going to be seniors, while at the same time creating some kind of an incentive. And I think we're open to the model that will keep costs from driving this up to the point where entitlements become the entire budget. And so long term, we want to look at some solutions to this, and I think we need to start that debate right now.
Well, let's talk about health care and the Obama health care law. Your side voted to repeal it. Senate did not. Right now, this week in Atlanta, a panel of appellate justices focused on one critical challenge to the law, and that was the question asking if the federal government can require Americans to buy medical insurance, what constitutional limit would prevent it from requiring other purchases and activities? So it looks like the challenge to it, if it is in the courts right now, which is where it seems to be sitting, because it doesn't seem to be going anyplace in 2014, might be that. Do you see that legal challenge as being the credible one?
That's the question. Can you mandate this? Can you force every citizen to participate? And I think there's a great likelihood that the Supreme Court is going to rule. And of course, we've got two problems since the passage of the legislation. First, we have the problem that the legislation actually cut Medicare by $500 billion. And going forward, we can see with the new Medicare report that there isn't the money in Medicare to sustain this new entitlement that's being built here. The second thing we see is the new reports, as of this week, that 30% of employers are expected now to look at the new health care law and say, well, let's just dump our employees on the government plan.
But finally, you've said, though, that perhaps it's not scrapping it all, but there should be discussion about new legislation.
Well, absolutely.
Do you agree with that?
I think we should replace it with legislation which will go a long way to driving down health care costs, making it more affordable. Part of that is to have insurance sold across state lines so that you've got one national market. That cuts the cost by 15%. Another thing you do is, you do tort reform so that you don't have these lawsuits that cost hundreds of billions of dollars in total. You make those reforms. There's a series of common sense steps that we can take without taking the money and adding to the deficit, because we're borrowing from China. 40% of every dollar we're borrowing. There are common sense steps we can take that help rectify the problem without the additional cost.
Congressman, we have many more questions for you. We're going to look south of the border when we get back.
Thanks.
More with Congressman Ed Royce right after this.